about the sources we use for things. And, when I'm on Facebook, you always see this great big argument breakout on Facebook. And it's pretty good because, people will have different points of view, as you always do. And then there's an argument about the sources. And I have to admit, I kind of, the mind boggles when it's people who've got no experience in a field, no real education in a field. Like, it's Joe Blow arguing with an astrophysicist about something, or, with a brain surgeon about something. It's that level of, no, I'm right, you're wrong, because, I Googled it. And you see it all the time. And the reason I thought that I would do tonight's stream about making sure our sources are fine, let me just go over this way a little bit and mess around, is quite simply that I've had a bit of a lesson with making sure my sources are good. Because remember, I've been saying that, I haven't been streaming to Twitch and YouTube at the same time. And, the program I was using was stuffing things up, and it was just didn't make sense. It was really difficult to stay on top of everything. And it turns out that when I was sick and recovering from things, when I set everything up, I actually watched a YouTuber who, let's put it politely, led me up the garden path in the way that I could be doing this easily. And it was just putting an extra roadblock into what I needed to do, and it kept stuffing up. Now, the stuffing up was my problem, but there was an easier way to get exactly what I wanted. So this morning it took me like 20 minutes and I had the problem sorted. I did a very quick test live, which seemed to go pretty well. I've since deleted those two so that you don't hear my rants. But, the longest bit was, just watching this other YouTuber actually explain it easily. So should I have been aware of it, that I was being led up the garden path? Yep, because it seemed a bit odd to me, given the research I'd done when I was setting it up. But you live and learn. And with me, it was just about how to multi-stream using the program I already had. And I kind of lost the plot because I wasn't feeling well before the accident, and then the accident just made things worse. So it was really hard to focus. The medication I was on was really strong. And I tell you what, I was not thinking straight at the best of times. And it's taken me quite a while to recover. And this morning it was just like that. It was done. And what I've noticed a lot with people who get caught up in the pseudo law when they try to do research because, either they don't trust their lawyer, or they can't find a lawyer, or they had a lawyer and dumped the lawyer and are now needing to do it themselves. The problem with pseudo law is the people who are putting it out there, they sound so convincing. It's like, it sounds so plausible. I mean, I'm not sure if it was in one of these lives on Bank Slayer where I talked about one of my lecturers in my first year of studying for my degree. She went off. I would say she went off her tits at the class because 3 or 4 students out of the cohort had actually written their assignment on what the law is based on the pseudo law. And she says, We've taught you how to do your research. We've taught you what sources are reliable, what you can use. So why did you go to these websites? Why did you take this approach? Because it's rubbish. You'll never get anywhere. If you won't pass your exams. You'll be kicked out of law school. You'll never become a lawyer if you play those games, and your clients would never win with those games. And she was right. We had been taught how to actually research the law and what was acceptable and not acceptable as sources. So I'm thinking of doing a bit of a rundown on future videos with as I get my brain function back, doing some PowerPoints. What are good sources of law? Where can you find this information? And what are some of the sources of pseudo law? Why won't you win with certain arguments? So my husband came home from working away yesterday, and last night, as I'm cooking tea after last night's broadcast, he was saying that one of the guys at work, he'd started this whole thing where he'd gotten a speeding fine or something, and he just wrote on it, it's been paid for with, the debt from my birth certificate, and, sent it back instead of paying the fine. And having worked for a very, very short period of time at the Magistrates Court in Perth, I can tell you right now what's going to happen with this guy, because he'll be fronting up in court unless he pays it. And then, if he defends it using the pseudo law, he will end up having to pay court costs, and his fine will be significantly more. It's just going to be a really expensive exercise for him. So, my husband sort of said to him, it's not going to end well for you, because he's kind of listened to me rant a bit, which is very unfortunate for my husband, but, the sacrifices you make. So there's people doing it all the time. They're falling for this, and, it's about time that I started doing the videos to put people on notice. I mean, at the moment, there's not really any great rush, nobody's really watching these. But I am going to ramp it up again. I am going to start my website with a blog. I will get the Patreon page happening, so that, if people get value out of the blog, then, they might want to drop me some change. You don't know. I'm just going to have a go at it. On a blog, I can link, to all of the things that I talk about, and then I can link to the video that I do about the blog post I've done, so that there's that interconnection, so that if I list sources, you can find it written down. You don't have to keep watching this video. You can just go and read the blog post where I, give my sources. I think that's sort of how I'm going to take it. I really want to get back into doing this seriously. I used to really enjoy doing the other blog, but I kept holding off on the law, and I'm glad I did, because oh my god, I would have been wrong. So do you want to talk to Oliver? Come on, you come and say hello. World, Oliver, World. Oh, look, isn't he gorgeous? Look at him. He's still scruffy. He's just woken up from a nap. So, and he's, so he needs his big groom tonight, don't you, darling? Eh? Look at that. I don't know what he wants, so I'm going to give him some treats, because, I can. There we go. So, getting all of the information onto the same page and linking to sources that are good resources. I think it's really hard, and there's a lot of people self-representing now because, let's face it, having a lawyer is really expensive, and lawyers can't take you on unless you've got the money up front. And who's got, 5,000 sitting there ready to go to be put into a trust account for your work? And $5,000 goes pretty quick with a lawyer. A senior lawyer will set you back about $450 an hour. So if you're going to phone your lawyer and talk for half an hour to 3/4 of an hour and then send him follow-up emails, you're going to go through that money really quick before too much work's done. So with the sources, I'm going to loosely mention some of them here because, as I say, there's nobody really watching. It's not critical today that I'm really concise, and my procedure for the lives will be I'll start writing out what I need to put into the description. I'll pop that in there so that all of the links are there before I start, and I'll have my PowerPoint slides up where I've now got my game. Not sure how I'm going to work it. I'll have to tweak it somehow. I'll have to figure out what to do with this camera that seems to not like to do it square. Oh look, my little, I'm not feeding him a lot, if you can see it. What I'm feeding him is like the broken bits of all of the treats, so they're really tiny little things. So it seems like he's getting a lot, but he's not. Oh, poor little man. So I will put the links into that, so I will start doing the work for you, and then I'll probably end up doing some webinars on Patreon so that only people who are paying for the webinars will get them. And that's just, I mean, it is just a little bit more information, but I mean, most of the information is out there. So I guess with the webinar, the beauty of it is if you're live, you can ask questions. But again, as with all of these videos, I've got to be really careful to make sure that you know that nothing I say here is legal advice. If you've got a problem where you need to go to court, or where somebody started an action, you've got to get legal advice for your matter. It's got to be personal to your circumstances. No matter how many cases you find that are really close, there'll be so many differences. So, and that can cut both ways. That can go to, you found this discussion on this case and you read through it and you thought that it was really good because, the case is known for, say, unconscionable conduct. And then it says, but, they lost the case, and you're sort of thinking, oh, so it wasn't any good. But then you can distinguish your case, and if you can distinguish your case, you can still use it. You can say, yes, in this case they lost the action, but our case is actually on point with what the judge said. So, we can do it that way. And that's why you need legal advice, because, because, a lawyer who knows their stuff will go through and they'll find those cases that support your argument, and they'll get it across the line. So anything I say here, it's just my thoughts on things, random thoughts. And talking about sources, I could really pull some up, but I've got lots of other things happening, so not really keen on that right now. And I don't like messing with the program while I'm using it. But if you're going to use, like if you're looking for case law, you've got Barnett Jade, which is jade.io. They've got most of the cases there. They've got links to the original judgment. If you do a paid subscription to that, then you get a lot more that you can use. If you're only using it for 3 or 4 months while you're doing your own research, because you really do need it, it's not too bad. It's a pretty good resource if you pay like a paid resource. You've also got Austlii, so that's AUSTLII. If you put that in, into the search bar, it'll actually find Austlii. I think it's .edu. Yeah, I think it's just .edu.au, something like that. Let me just quickly put it in here. I'll tell you what the link is. It's austlii.edu.au. And on Austlii, you actually do get, you can find articles that cover the topic, you can find the acts, you can find cases. There's a way of doing it. I will put in links to where to find how to search the Austlii database. I think I'll do a lot of these kind of videos where I'm just putting in the links to other people who are explaining how to do it all. So you've got, for Jade, there are videos on how to research on Jade, you know, how to use it properly, how to get the best out of it, and the same with Austlii. There's a few other databases that are free. I can link to those. The best starting point is always, you know, some of these things, like the proper websites that give you proper research. I want to put together a blog post where or a number of blog posts, I guess, where I talk about the pseudo law, so that if something sounds like, you know, the law's not the law because, you know, Whitlam stuffed it all, you've got to be on the lookout. And I mean, my biggest argument with it is, and I had this argument with a former politician who's fighting a case, and I said, so what are you wanting out of it? Do you actually want to get rid of all of the laws and acts we've had since the 70s that have been brought in under what you call is the wrong act? So, you know, the Australia Act wasn't legal, blah 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 blah, so we're not going to account for any of the stuff since the 70s and 80s. We're going to roll everything back. So what laws are you going to replace it with? You know, are we going to go back to the Matrimonial Causes Act? Are we going to go back to, you know, all of these weird laws that punish you because, you know, you weren't doing the right thing? You know, our laws that we've got today have evolved for our lifestyles. So you can say that anything that councils do is wrong because, you know, councils aren't legal. But, you know, you sort of still have to say, well, how are we going to pay for all of the things that councils provide? So, yeah, you're saying we don't have to pay rates because, but, you know, our rates actually do pay for things in the community. A lot of things I don't agree with, and I think some of the rates are phenomenally high for what you get, and they are kind of a tax. But some rates are really reasonable. So, what's a reasonable rate? You know, that they can charge you. What services should a council provide for that? You know, there's costs to everything, and if you're going to get rid of councils, then are you going to make the West Australian government look after all of the small country towns when they've got no idea what's going on there? You know, the best services are provided close to where they're needed because, you know, they know what's needed. But it's always dodgy. So, you know, what do you want to achieve? And if you're just going to argue, well, the laws, I don't have to follow the laws because, then what laws are you willing to follow? If you win and they say, okay, we'll apply the law as it stood in 1903, are you really going to be happy with the outcome? Because punishments were a bit different too, and they're going to go to something that's equivalent to what you've been charged with. So, you know, and some of these things weren't all that good. They just weren't good laws. So you've got to pick your battles. And you know, this whole idea that our birth certificate, there's $1 million account somewhere that we can draw on. It's like, I love that idea, I really do. It doesn't get you very far, but it's a great idea. It sounds pretty good. And you know, the reason why everything's in capital letters, it's like, is it really though? It's look, I'm going to have to put him down because now that he's had his treat, you go and have your dinner. Go on, you be a good boy. So, how do you know which sources are actually correct? I mean, they sound really good. I've listened to these people who sort of explain that the words that are used, they've got, you know, it doesn't mean this, it means that. And it's actually based on this real thing where, you know, the legal words used don't always have the common meaning. But if you look at any act or even a contract, some of the words are defined to have a particular meaning for that, for either the act or within the contract. And that's just so that both sides are on the same page. You know what you're talking about. So, you know, you're not talking about the red car, you're only talking about the blue cars. You're not talking about, you know, great-grandfather. You know, this only refers to paternal grandfather, that kind of thing, where it really limits the meaning of words so that when you draw up a clause, you don't have a 27-paragraph clause that covers the fact that, you know, the family's defined to mean, you know, these people are part of the family for in relation to the trust, that kind of thing. It's to simplify things. So it's not hard to see where you start getting confused and where these people have an edge in to say, well, you know, all of these words have a different meaning and it's their way of screwing you over. It's like, you know, the secret language of the Masons, you know, who are running the world, that kind of thing. I find it a bit frustrating, but it's such a deep topic, and as I say, because I've been so sick, I haven't really taken the time to really delve into it because I knew I wasn't really thinking straight. It's only been the last week or so that my brain's actually kicked back in. And tell you what, it feels good. It feels good to be thinking again, to know that it's all back. So when I start combining it all, you'll be able to follow it easy because I'll have screenshots in both. I'll put screenshots on the video and I'll have the screenshots in the blog post so that, you know, you can follow the arguments that they use in pseudo law, arguments that are actually real legal arguments that hold up in court. When you get to court, you're like some of the constitutionalists, the freemen of the land people, they get very aggressive with judges and magistrates. They really do this whole, oh, you know, don't have to listen to you, mate, you know, I don't care, you know, you haven't got the right thing, and, you know, talk over the other side, you know, are very aggressive, are just shit stirring basically. And, you know, judges and magistrates don't have to listen. You've got to show them respect. And when you use the real legal arguments, you respectfully listen to the other side. You take notes. You can take heaps of notes as they're talking. And then as you stand up, you say your bit and you can respond to some of the rubbish that they've spouted. Lawyers will spout rubbish. If something that they put to the court is wrong, you can say, Your Honour, I note that, you know, the learned friend on the other side said, or, you know, the friend on the other side said, you know, the house was a blue house and, you know, we took out the mortgage in 2018. Your Honour, I respectfully put it to you that the house was a red house. It was actually in this street, so he's got the address wrong. And the loan in 2018 was, you know, refinancing. We'd actually paid out the mortgage on it back in 2010 after having purchased it in 1993. So, you know, it changes the picture, and you're sort of saying, you know, we borrowed the money because, unlike what the other side said, it might not be totally relevant, but you get a chance to say it. You can put it on the record that, you know, well, no, they've got the story wrong. They're absolutely wrong with how they've put facts to you, Your Honour. And if you're polite, and what you're doing is, what happens when you go to court is you get the law. You don't necessarily get justice. And the courts are tied a fair bit with precedent. But if you can distinguish your case from the precedent, then they don't have to follow the precedent that the other side might rely on. You know, the other side might say, you know, this case is fully on point, blah, 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 blah. You know, the circumstances here are exactly the same, so your ruling, Your Honour, has to be exactly the same. And then you stand up and say, well, actually, Your Honour, the circumstances are different, and they're distinguished to such an extent that you do not have to follow the precedent. You can rule, and then you tell them what you reckon the judge can rule it as, and then you say, and, you know, I'll put it to you. Oh, you know, you wouldn't say I'll put it to you. That's, don't take my advice on that. Don't listen to me on that. That's my opinion. It's not my legal advice. This is just me making things up as I go along. But you can lay out the facts to the judge in a way that points your side of the story more convincingly. And if you can distinguish your case enough from the other side's, or the one that they're relying on, and you can say, you don't have to follow this precedent. What we've got is a totally different set of circumstances. You know, the other side knew, and then all of the things that they knew that they weren't allowed to do. They couldn't, because they knew that they couldn't do what they did, but they did it anyway. They didn't care. You can do something like that. But the way that you argue in court is you have to be respectful. You have to be logical and in order and as brief as possible. Don't confuse anybody with long-winded stories or expecting people to remember everything that's gone before. You can refer. Like, everybody thinks you just stand up and talk in court. You don't. You know, you can watch, actually there are videos on YouTube and around the traps where, you know, lawyers are teaching young lawyers how to address the court. You can watch the moot courts where, you know, kids in high school and uni are doing moot court, which is like, you know, that they're arguing a case you know, and it's a competition. And you can watch them and learn how to address the court. And if you watch, they all have notes. Everybody takes notes. And if you watch any of this stuff, as the other side's talking, they're sitting there taking notes. They're not relying on their memory. They're not doing this whole thing. And it's just something that, you know, I've seen some self-represented litigants, and they're so much better than some lawyers in how they present the case, which to me makes sense, because they know their story so much better than the lawyer does, because the lawyer's got so many cases on foot. So, you know, sometimes they're not on top of all of the facts. But, you know, if you've got a running thing and then you take notes and Post-its and these sticky ones, they're really handy. You know, you just put them over the files so that as you're going through, and you know, what evidence you need to hand up to the court to be a bit more persuasive, you know, you've got to have all of that ready. But that's the main difference between having good sources and, you know, having the right documents together, as opposed to doing the pseudo law where you're just being abusive. You're just putting forward a convincing argument, and as I said, you get the law, so you might not get justice, you might not win, but as I've said before, you know, people have filed appeals and actually won the appeal and been able, you know, had a retrial granted, because the decision that was handed down just wasn't logical. It wasn't based on fact. It wasn't based on law. There was no, you know, there were errors of law and fact that, you know, it's interesting. I should talk about some of them. And in talking about some of the law, I can have a few of the websites up and, you know, take you through some of the cases that they've relied on, and, you know, how you look at this stuff and how you can find it. Because I guess the reason I'm doing this is because if you're forced to self-represent, you're more likely to find the pseudo law stuff and, you know, all of the rubbish that's out there, and maybe shoot yourself in the foot with it. And I'd just like to, you know, hold up a little bit of a flag and say, come over here, because, you know, you don't want to go that way. You know, put up a detour sign so that you don't head down that wrong path. And as I say, you know, it might not have been law related, but I certainly found a dodgy video the other day that added an extra step I didn't need. Who knew? Who knew? It's, yeah, YouTube's great, but you always have to be aware that not everybody's an expert at everything. We can't do everything. I would never do a video telling you how to do anything technical with videos, unless it was to say don't do this because I did this and it didn't work well. But, you know, watch your sources. Don't take the first thing that sounds reasonable. You really got to make sure you've got the case law covered. And when you instruct someone, you've got to have all of that in place in your head. So it's a massive topic, really, and I seem to be talking randomly about it, but it's not really. It's yeah, it's all good. Hang on, let me just pull up something else. I'm not going to show you, only because, you know, oh, hang on, let's not do that. Oh, and he's back. It's the Oliver. He's back. Oh. Well, okay, I've done that. Yeah, it's a bit weird. Let me just, okay, looks good. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that tonight, only because it's all very random at the moment. Sources are important, and I really want to cover off on it extensively, with giving you examples, and as I say, I still need to get on top of the technology, and you know, there's no one here watching. So he's only a Maltese, so he's a Maltese Shih Tzu cross, and I'm sure he thinks he's a Rottweiler. He's got to protect me. So I'm going to end this. I shall catch you later, and yeah, I'll get these things started for you, so that when I get an audience, higher audience, we'll be able to get it together. So not too much time wasting right now, and I'll